Chapter 16 of The Dog Crusoe and His Master. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Allison Hester of Athens, Georgia. The Dog Crusoe and His Master by R.M. Ballantyne. Chapter 16. Dick becomes a horse tamer. Resumes his journey. Charlie's doings. Misfortunes which lead to, but do not terminate in, the Rocky Mountains. A grizzly bear. There is a proverb or saying, or at least somebody or book has told us, that some Irishman once said, "Be aisy, or if you can't be aisy as ye can." Now, we count that as good advice, and strongly recommend it to all and sundry. Had we been at the side of Dick Varley on the night after his taming of the wild horse, we would have strongly urged that advice upon him. Whether he would have listened or not is quite another question. We rather think not. Reader, if you wish to know why, go and do what he did. And if you feel no curious sensations about the region of the loins after it, we will tell you why Dick Varley wouldn't have listened to that advice. Can a man feel as if his joints were wrenched out of their sockets and listen to advice, be that advice good or bad? Can he feel as though these joints were trying to reset and redislocate themselves perpetually, and listen to advice? Can he feel as if he were sitting down on red-hot iron when he's not sitting down at all, and listen to advice? Can he? But no! Why pursue the subject? Poor Dick spent that night in misery, and the greater part of the following day in sleep to make up for it. When he got up to breakfast in the afternoon, he felt much better, but shaky. "Now, pup," he said, stretching himself, "we'll go see our horse. Ours, pup, yours and mine. Didn't you help catch him, pup?" Crusoe acknowledged the fact with a wag and a playful bow wow 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 wow, and followed his master to the place where the horse had been picketed. It was standing there quite quiet, but looking a little timid. Dick went boldly up to it and patted its head and stroked its nose, for nothing is so likely to alarm either a tame or a wild horse as any appearance of timidity or hesitation on the part of those who approach him. After treating it thus for a short time, he stroked down its neck and then its shoulders, the horse eyeing him all the time nervously. Gradually he stroked its back and limbs gently, and walked quietly round and round it once or twice, sometimes approaching and sometimes going away, but never either hesitating or doing anything abruptly. This done, he went down to the stream and filled his cap with water and carried it to the horse, which snuffed suspiciously and backed a little. So he laid the cap down, and went up and patted him again. Presently he took up the cap and carried it to his nose. The poor creature was almost choking with thirst, so that the moment he understood what was in the cap, he buried his lips in it and sucked it up. This was a great point gained. He had accepted a benefit at the hands of his new master. He had become a debtor to man, and no doubt he felt the obligation. Dick filled the cap, and the horse emptied it again and again and again until its burning thirst was slaked. Then Dick went up to his shoulder, patted him, undid the line that fastened him, and vaulted lightly on his back. We say lightly, for it was so, but it wasn't easily, as Dick could have told you. However, he was determined not to forego the training of his steed on account of what he would have called a little bit pain. At this unexpected act, the horse plunged and reared a good deal, and seemed inclined to go through the performance of the day before over and over again. But Dick patted and stroked him into quiescence, and having done so, urged him into a gallop over the plains, causing the dog to gambol around in order that he might get accustomed to him. This tried his nerves a great deal, and no wonder, for if he took Crusoe for a wolf, which no doubt he did, he must have thought him a very giant of the pack. By degrees they broke into a furious gallop, and after breathing him well, Dick returned and tied him to the tree. Then he rubbed him down again, and gave him another drink. This time the horse smelt his new master all over, and Dick felt that he had conquered him by kindness. No doubt the tremendous run of the day before could scarcely be called kindness, but without this subduing run he never could have brought the offices of kindness to bear on so wild a steed. During all these operations Crusoe sat looking on with demure sagacity, drinking in wisdom and taking notes. We know not whether any notes made by the canine race have ever been given to the world, but certain are we that, if the notes and observations made by Crusoe on that journey were published, they would, to say the least, surprise us. Next day Dick gave the wild horse his second lesson and his name. He called him Charlie, after a much loved companion in the Mustang Valley, and long and heartily did Dick Varley laugh as he told the horse his future designation in the presence of Crusoe, for it struck him as somewhat ludicrous that a mustang, which 2 days ago pawed the earth in all the pride of independent freedom, should suddenly come down so low as to carry a hunter on his back and be named Charlie. The next piece of instruction began by Crusoe being led up under Charlie's nose, while Dick patted the dog with his right hand, he patted the horse with his left. It backed a good deal at first, and snorted, but Crusoe walked slowly and quietly in front of him several times, each time coming nearer, until, again, he stood under his nose. Then the horse smelt him nervously, and gave a sigh of relief when he found that Crusoe paid no attention to him whatever. Dick then ordered the dog to lie down at Charlie's feet, and went to the camp to fetch his rifle, and buffalo robe, and pack of meat. These and all the other things belonging to him were presented for inspection, one by one, to the horse, who arched his neck and put forward his ears, and eyed them at first, but smelt them all over, and seemed to feel more easy in his mind. Next the buffalo robe was rubbed over his nose, then over his eyes and head, then down his neck and shoulder, and lastly was placed on his back. Then it was taken off and flung on. After that it was strapped on, and the various little items of the camp were attached to it. This done, Dick took up his rifle and let him smell it. Then he put his hand on Charlie's shoulder, vaulted on to his back, and rode away. Charlie's education was completed, and now our hero's journey began again in earnest, and with some prospect of its speedy termination. In the course of training through which Dick put his wild horse, he had been at much greater pains, and had taken far longer time than is usually the case among Indians, who will catch and break and ride a wild horse into camp in less than 3 hours. But Dick wanted to do the thing well, which the Indians are not careful to do. Besides, it must be borne in remembrance that this was his first attempt, and that his horse was one of the best and most high-spirited, while those caught by the Indians, as we have said, are generally the poorest of a drove. Dick now followed the trail of his lost companions at a rapid pace, yet not so rapidly as he might have done, being averse to exhausting his good dog and his new companion. Each night he encamped under the shade of a tree or bush, when he could find one, or in the open prairie when there were none, and, picketing his horse to a short stake or pin which he carried with him for purpose, lit his fire, had supper, and lay down to rest. In a few days Charlie became so tame and accustomed to his master's voice that he seemed quite reconciled to his new life. There can be no doubt whatever that he had a great dislike to solitude, for on one occasion when Dick and Crusoe went off a mile or so from the camp where Charlie was tied, and disappeared from his view, he was heard to neigh so loudly that Dick ran back thinking the wolves must have attacked him. He was all right, however, and exhibited evident tokens of satisfaction when they returned. On another occasion his fear of being left alone was more clearly demonstrated. Dick had been unable to find wood or water that day, so he was obliged to encamp upon the open plain. The want of water was not seriously felt, however, for he had prepared a bladder in which he always carried enough to give him 1 pannikin of hot syrup, and leave a mouthful for Crusoe and Charlie. Dried buffalo dung formed a substitute for fuel. Spreading his buffalo rope, he lit his fire, put on his pannikin to boil, and stuck up a piece of meat to roast, to the great delight of Crusoe, who sat looking on with much interest. Suddenly Charlie, who was picketed a few hundred yards off in a grassy spot, broke his halter close by the headpiece, and with a snort of delight bounded away, prancing and kicking up his heels. Dick heaved a deep sigh, for he felt sure that his horse was gone. However, in a little Charlie stopped, and raised his nose high in the air, as if to look